Evening arrives like a soft apology, pouring amber light through the narrow window of a small wooden house that smells faintly of cardamom and old timber. The floorboards creak the way old friends sigh, a bronze kettle hisses on a blackened stove, and a lace curtain dances whenever the wind thinks of something to say. On a low wooden chair sits an old woman grandmother to some, a quiet legend to others. Her hands are maps of years, thin rivers of vein, the soft rise of knucklebone hills, the faded constellations of healed cuts, when she folds them over each other. They keep still the way a small bird rests between flights, her eyes soft. Tired and startlingly alive hold the burnished sheen of a life that has witnessed the whole orchestra, drums of loss, flutes of joy, the steady cello of duty. A young man sits close, his elbows on his knees, a notebook forgotten on the little table. He is grown enough to understand the weight of a story and young enough to believe in its medicine. He watches her the way one watches a horizon, waiting for the line to tremble, to reveal something beyond its stillness. Tea, she says, the word carrying a smile in its shadow. She pours. The cups are chipped white porcelain, soldiering. Unlike everything else in this house. The world exhale slows. She begins. There was a field once, brittle with summer, wide as the future. The sky was always to sizes too big, and someone had stretched it till it hummed. A boy stood there, tall and sun-browned, a bat in his hands. The leather ball came singing. He met it with a clean, unhesitating crack that sounded like hope snapping into place. Samuel. He was my brother, not just good beautiful. He could read. A bowler's temper in his run-up, measure the wind, slice the air, place the ball where grass would remember the kiss. People came to watch him the way they came to watch a sunrise. They cupped their hands around their eyes and believed for an afternoon that the world might reorganize itself into something finer. If life had been fair, he might have worn a national jersey and a nation's hunger for victory. But fairness is a child, impatient and easily distracted. Our father's lungs failed, the kind of failure that makes a family's ceiling feel lower by an inch a day. Money fled the house like birds. Samuel laid his bat gently against the wall and picked up a toolbox. He told me it was temporary. He told me a lot of things people who love you tell you. The field kept its summers. The radio still remembered how to sing the scores of other people's sons. Our kitchen learned the sharp arithmetic of smaller meals. What I remember most is the way he walked to work each morning, shoulders back, chin up, eyes bright as if he was still running toward a ball under a giant sky. Some days, as he buttoned his shirt, he'd tap my knuckles with a ghost bat and grin. Life's a long inning, mirror, he'd say, you don't leave the pitch just because the pitch turns mean. The man I married had a singing voice better than his speaking one, Elias. His laughter broadened rims, his sorrows wore clean shoes. He sold hardware from a shop so narrow that when the customers stood shoulder to shoulder, he had to slide sideways to fetch anything from the back. I loved him the way water loves old stone patiently, without spectacle. We married with borrowed garlands for our first dinner. The rice was shy and the curry thin, but the city was kind that evening. It let a little rain fall, the gentle kind that smells like forgiveness. Our apartment measured itself by what we could hide under the bed and what we could stack above the wardrobe. At night, the ceiling fan pretended it was a breeze from a generous world. In that tiny space, we engineered hope from scraps, a second-hand radio, a chipped blue bowl, a plant that refused to die. We learned to keep one another warm with stories. When blankets were too few, we were not yet brave, but we were stubborn. I learned to sew at midnight. A neighbor showed me the geometry of patterns, how fabric listens to scissors, how stitches invite edges to trust each other. Elias came home each day smelling of oil and iron. His palms dark with the city's metallic breath. He'd place his pocket change on the table and kiss my forehead as if it were a small country he had promised to return to, and he always did. It was born from 2 shelves and a bell. We rented the corner of a street that constantly rehearsed leaving, but never actually went anywhere. I painted the sign myself, Mirror & Co., notions and needlework. A small boy with an accordion smile hammered it in with a round stone while I stood below, holding a ladder with a worried ferocity that made him laugh. The first customer was a woman who wanted her blouse mended. The second wanted advice on buttons, why the red ones made the world tilt more dramatically than the black. The third needed a safety pin and left with 3, because I told her that caution. Like kindness is best in multiples, the bell sounded. Like a tiny cathedral, I learned the comedy and heartbreak of human needs measured in thread, thimbles, hooks, hope. We saved, slowly. With the fatigue of an anthill and the quiet miracle of an anthill when the city sent its storms. We learned to lift everything off the floor and tie what could be tied. We learned the choreography of sandbags. We learned to speak gently to the dark when the power ran away. People came to the shop for buttons and gossip, for needle sizes and consolation. I listened to wives who carried houses on their backs. I listened to girls who carried futures in their eyes. Words slipped like honey. Mirror won't cheat you. Mirror mends what others discard. And so they came. Floods don't arrive like criminals. They arrive like misunderstood guests. The river swelled with old grief and newly imagined anger. Rain thought of itself as a revolution. In the morning, the street was brown water. By noon, it was a roaring sentence with no punctuation. By evening, the shop was a drowning room. We stood in the doorway like night guards of a losing empire. Elias, with his strong forearms, lifted the sewing machine onto higher shelves. I cradled boxes of buttons like sleeping doves. Outside, a cooking vessel floated by. Still proud above its submerged purpose, children shouted, or maybe they were. Laughing floods make it hard to tell. When morning returned, it looked embarrassed. Mud lay everywhere like an apology that couldn't find its grammar. The bell did not ring when I opened the door. It had lost its small faith. Thread bled dye. The measuring tape had swollen into a snake. We worked 2 days and 2 nights with rags and buckets, naming each rescued thing like a survivor. Button, thimble, tin. Samuel arrived with a mop and that old field sunlight still stored somewhere in him. You don't quit mid-innings, he said, wringing out a cloth. We laughed without humor and worked until our joints filed complaints. Customers returned with casseroles and torn blouses and stories of how they, too, had feared, had hoped, had listened to the night like an enemy and then like a friend. That week, I realized a shop isn't a place, it's a relationship. People chose to keep mine alive, and so I kept them company as they stitched their lives back together. Years passed. The world collected more noise, new buses, old arguments, television sets that made the news feel taller than our houses. Our son, Peter, grew tall and impatient. Our daughter, Ruth, grew sharp and kind all at once. Our eldest, Miriam, learned to carry other people's sorrow like folded laundry, neatly, efficiently, without self-congratulation. On a Sunday of forgiving weather, a local tournament invited old names for a charity match. Samuel's name was one of those with dust on it, but still legible. He put on borrowed whites and laughter that didn't quite fit his face. He walked onto the field with a limp. He tried to disguise years had held him in a different shape. When the bowler ran, the sun watched. When the ball flew, I forgot to breathe. Samuel's bat met it not with the ferocity of a young man, but with the intelligence of a survivor. He placed the ball as if he was placing a tired child into a bed. Our crowd remembered how to be loud. Children who had never seen him play chorused his name like a newly discovered him. He scored enough to make the old men's eyes shine and the young ones Google him later. hoping to find a photograph that could make sense of the noise inside. Their chests. Afterward, he sat under a tree and cried a little, the way a sky might, not for the runs he scored now,